My friends and I were playing Wrath of the Righteous, a Pathfinder adventure module, so spoilers for anyone planning to play that adventure. So, a book or so into the adventure, we defeated this traitor named Stoughton Vane. We had executed him for his crimes, which were numerous, but included biting off the ear of our beloved party paladin. Truly a crime worthy of death. Anyway, little did we know that this was not going to be the last we saw of this guy, as his armor ends up going missing shortly after. We find out that he's come back as a Grave Knight. Not just a Grave Knight, but a mythic Grave Knight. Grave Knights, since I'm not sure if they're the same in other systems, are basically liches that instead possess an armor set. And we realize that while we're fighting him, his armor is incomplete. Even if we defeat him here, he's hidden a piece of his armor somewhere, so he can come back later from that piece. Not sure if this is a trait exclusive to mythic Grave Knights, probably, but it seems overpowered to us. Except there's a loophole. See, we defeated him, but we didn't kill him right away since we have to destroy the armor to actually kill him. Instead, one of our party members, our brilliant Slayer, who always had out-of-the-box ideas, asked a horrifying question. How much does lead cost, and how much do you think we could gather on short notice? Being rich, high-level adventurers, we quickly secured a ton of lead, encased his current body in it too. See, as a Grave Knight, he would be reviving from the largest piece of his armor remaining, which was now trapped in a lead cube. And lead has some special properties, meaning that his allies couldn't scry for his location. I guess every ally is Superman. We hid his lead cube in the demiplane our sorceress used to craft items for the party. There he stayed, in suspended animation until we find the remaining piece of armor and finally dealt with him for good. And our DM? He thought the lead plan was the funniest thing he ever heard. He just replaced the later Vane fight with a similar CR encounter. We all had a great time and jokingly refer to Vane's lead cube sometimes as the sorceress's crafting table. Hey, I never said I was against a good glory story, and this one? It's just downright glorious. Though I will say, how did you get that much lead? Just who's keeping this stuff around? Minor plot hole. Millions must die. Campaign's over. I was desperate to play some Dungeons & Dragons after months of my main game canceling for one reason or another. So I looked into some of those find a game forums on Reddit. Eventually I found one I liked that boasted a homebrew setting. I hopped on a Discord call with a few of the players only to find out that the person I've been talking to was the Dungeon Master, and in fact was just another player, which is kind of a red flag. They gave me the rundown of things and how the campaign had been going so far, and that seemed odd to me, but I decided to give it a shot anyway. We played our first game, and I noticed the Dungeon Master seemed very tuned out the entire time. We'd say what action we were taking, and would be greeted with silence for long stretches of time, sometimes stretching into nearly 2 minutes of complete silence. After that session, I asked the others if that was normal, and they said it was, but not every session was like that. I was excited to do another game because I'd really gelled with the other players and wanted to see if things would improve. And then the DM never responded to any of the, "Hey, when are we playing again?" messages. Like ever? It was decided another player, the one that had been posting the ads for the campaign, would just start the campaign instead. And he said he wouldn't be able to do the weekly sessions that he wanted to be able to do. He wanted to be a player every once in a while. So I volunteered to DM my own campaign on the off weeks. We started his campaign, and it was amazing, until it wasn't. A few sessions in, there was an argument between two different player characters that had been given two different time-sensitive missions tied to their backstories, and it seemed like we may be splitting the party. Don't you know?
You never split the party, cleric.
Real ones know, alright? Real ones know. Or that if one of the player characters, my character, would be stepping away temporarily, which I was willing to do for the sake of like a realistic roleplay. The argument ended with one of the players vetoing the DM's plot and forcing him to go a different direction, and he decided to do that. The campaign continued for a few more sessions before an extremely long, arduous combat session involving dragons that were way too powerful for our level 4-ish party at the time, which I'm pretty sure is like every frickin' dragon in the monster manual. You're level 4! There were also NPCs that were fully statted out D&D characters that were multiple levels above us. A combat where I was charmed for 75% of the battle, another player character was outright killed within the first 2 rounds. Fun, 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 fun. Meanwhile, my campaign was interspersed between sessions, and that was going wonderfully too. And much better than the other. Until it wasn't. See, my game happened to be a survival horror setting that had an extremely dangerous magical disease that no one understood. One of my player characters had a medical background, played by the same person who demanded a veto, by the way, and had become very interested in solving the mystery of this disease. The story led them to a clinic full of people suffering from said disease, where the player character decided to collect samples and whatnot. Another player decided to help them, and I allowed them, because the intent was that it would be an overarching mystery for the entire party during the entire campaign. But the medical background player character had gone very silent, so I asked them if they were doing okay. They responded, clearly crying, saying that people were trying to steal her thing, and that everyone was ignoring her and what she wanted. And she began to dig into the other player that attempted to just help her. I tried to defuse the situation by saying I might have misread some intention or misunderstood what was going on, because in truth, I was very confused on what the issue was. Eventually, it got very silent, and someone suggested that we take a few minutes to calm down so we can get back to the game. Everyone stepped away from their computers, and I simply left the call, and left the Discord group shortly after too. It reached the point where every session, we were fighting over something silly. Two of the players seemingly hated each other. One player constantly seemed to have their boundaries crossed every session. I attempted numerous times to talk to them and sent them a few safety tools to fill out, and all that was ignored too. And the other DM had started being very weird in private messages with me, and I don't even want to get into that. Bro, trust me, I've seen it before.
Hey, I got a text from... I am in love with you. Dude, you texted me. Did you have to, bust into my house? Jeez, I'm gonna call the cops.
Yeah, I know, but did you not hear what I just said?
Bro, we played D&D together.
Okay, but
Are you in love with me too?
No.
Are you... Are you sure?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, 911, I'd like to report a... Not worth the very little fun I was having. It all made me suddenly very comfortable waiting a few weeks for a session with my actual friends. Indeed, my friend. Yeah, I don't see why you would stick around for a game that is clearly not very fun for you. Look, I understand the urge to play your favorite tabletop game as soon as possible and to maximize the amount of time you're having with these games, but you gotta keep in mind, the groups are just as important as the games themselves. There's a lot of factors that go into making one of these games fun, and therefore, trying to rush it, trying to play as much as possible, it's gonna result in some games that just aren't that good. Sometimes it is worth it to wait. Keep in mind, I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm not trying to make TTRPGs sound like this ungodly endeavor of impossible difficulty, but they do require a degree of effort. And if you don't have a DM or a group that's willing to put in that effort, then just wait for your friends. At the time, I had little to no tabletop role-playing game experience. I played one session of the Fallout TTRPG and began playing a campaign of Call of Cthulhu, nothing more. I was starving for some roleplay, and in a Discord community similar to LFG but in Spanish, I saw it. Someone was looking for players for an online campaign played in the Persona TTRPG, which was perfect. I was just in my Persona phase. Persona 3 Reload had just come out, and I was grinding it like crazy. So I asked to join, and I was accepted. After making my character via DMs with the DM, I joined the Discord channel where basically everyone seemed to be friends with each other. Thankfully, I did spot one of the players from the Cthulhu campaign was there, which is slightly important for later. In total, we were 6, which turned out to be a bit of a problem down the road. I'll proceed to name the important people. The DM, Cult Guy, a player from the Call of Cthulhu campaign, and it was about building a cult, and Arl, playing a weeby character. So the day comes in, and no session 0. At the time, I didn't know the importance of a session 0 though. The invitation did specify that there would be some violence and sexual themes. They were not discussed, not once, which is a bit of a red flag. Once we start with the first session, I was hooked up. I mean, I was playing a character in the Persona universe. For someone that had a bit of hyperfixation on not only the Persona universe, but the Shin Megami Tensei franchise as a whole, this was amazing. I loved all these character ideas, even though 2 of the players couldn't make it to the session, it still went pretty great. But it did show some of the problems this campaign would have in the future. For starters, the DM did not have 1 or 2 or even 3 DMPCs that were just constantly around. He had 5, which, okay, yeah, social links are important, but I don't think it's expected for them to be constantly in the dorms that the player characters are staying in. But still, if he can do it, more power to them. The second problem was Arl, not as a player, not even his character. Yeah, the character was a little annoying. I mean, it was a weeby character, but more just him and the DM's relationship. As more weeks passed, more sessions passed, more and more the DM seemed antagonistic with Arl. Arl was a bit of a joker most of the time, making little quips over the virtual table. The problem was DM was constantly shutting it up with very aggressive language, and Arl always ended up saying a very sad, okay, and the session would just continue like normal. Now, I don't know these people. I, alongside Cult Guy, were the odd ones out of this friend group, so even though I should have said something, even if it was a private message to DM saying, hey, I personally really find it uncomfortable with your attitude when it comes to Arl, I didn't say anything because I didn't know their dynamic. Maybe it's just how their friendship worked. In hindsight, Arl's defeated okays were indicative that he didn't feel good when the shouting happened, and I should have spoken up, even if just for me feeling uncomfortable. To be honest, as I mentioned again, Arl and specifically his character were a little annoying. His character even having slapstick or funny moments in the middle of serious conversations. But he would apologize and ask the group if he needed to tone down his character, and every character and player agreed he should probably change how he was role-playing. It was how his character would act, and no one had a big problem with it. I would like to say this was the first problem I had with the campaign. Sadly, there's also the topic of how the DM ran the system. First of all, the combat. What? It was just confusing as hell. It wasn't a fault of the system. The DM decided to make his own rules with clashes, multi-attacks for even the most basic enemy, changes to the elemental stats, new effects, and effect counters like countdowns. Frankly, I didn't understand crap even after 10 sessions of play. I was just attacking and defending when the enemies attacked my character. Also, it was boring as hell. Since we were 6 players, a single round combat would already be a little longer than normal, but then of course, there were the DMPCs. Usually, there were 2 or 3 of them in the battle too, so even more turns, and then there was the DM's battle system itself. Since instead of just 1 attack per round, movement didn't really matter, it was a TTRPG based on persona. You know, I've always found that kind of turn-based combat very gentlemanly, but since every enemy had a multi-attack, they would have to roll for every attack, usually 2 or 3, and then since the DM implemented a clash system, the player, instead of just checking if the dice was greater or equal to their defense, they would have to roll for every enemy attack thrown, and enemies would do the same for players, or DMPC attacks. 3. The DMPCs. Not only that, but there was a tempo problem. They also were OP as hell. Like, player characters would be doing 9 to 11 points of damage, 20 or less if it was a crit. The DMPCs were making around 20 to 27 points of damage per DMPC per round. So at the end, usually the final blow would be coming from a DMPC, or if it was from a player, the whole fight just ended up feeling pretty unsatisfying. Bro, I do not understand this mentality. Even when it's narratively appropriate, I don't like it when an NPC gets the kill.
Narratively, it's so good.
I feel bad because it's an NPC.
No, this is perfect. This is perfect.
Yeah, this is great.
Okay, good.
It's
You guys are cool with
story-wise,
it. You guys are
it's
cool with it. You know, I'm starting to think maybe anxiety can be a good thing. You know, it stops you from doing stupid stuff like this. Now, guess what? That's not all. There were several problems on the role-playing side as well. I had an entire paragraph describing how broken it was since there were too many people for this system. But for the sake of brevity, basically the majority of the sessions where you were waiting for your turn to have 15 to 30 minutes of social playtime and then watching other players have their moment, which is not always bad. There were good scenes and players did an amazing job embodying their characters. However, for all the reasons listed above, Cult Guy decided to leave the campaign, and now I was truly alone with this group of people that were usually friendly, but sometimes were kind of uncomfortable. I now wish that I'd left my friend. Instead, I stayed because I was playing a Persona TTRPG. Now, I want to tell you the reason this campaign went to the tomb, the DMPCs. For starters, my character. We'll go with Mai. Mai was a girl, canonically 18 years old, and I loved her. She was my first D&D character that really spoke to me in a narrative level. She was a bit dry, as for her upbringing, but inside had a passion for art and self-expression. And there so happens that one of the DMPCs, Otis, was an artist himself, so naturally a bond between them was established. He even was the leader of the art club of the school, so Mai saw Otis as a role model and a teacher. Otis technically was also 18 years old, but they were an immortal who had been frozen in time for about 2 years, so he was like 20. I guess you can see where this is going. The DM messaged messaged me to propose a romance between the two characters. I'm a person that can't, for the life of me, say no, but I did plan to make Mai an aromantic character, and I said that I wasn't sure, so let's not rush it. However, DM apparently interpreted my words as yes, and began heavily hinting that Otis was in love with Mai. Again, I felt uncomfortable. I'm not aromantic myself, but I don't want to engage in romantic roleplay as Mai, and even less with a platonic role model of hers. So I played it as if Mai didn't have a clue. Fortunately, the campaign didn't go far enough to confront the situation. Basically, the finale of the first arc came and went, and with it, the death of the campaign. There was another DMPC, Ryuto. Basically, everything around this first arc was about Ryuto, how his childhood friend had become an enemy of the party. In the final dungeon, Ryuto was separated from the party, and they were, for the first time, fighting alone. After some lore dump of Ryuto in form of vision, the party was confronted with the final boss. The combat finally was not as slow as without having DMPCs and just one enemy in the combat. It went at a good pace. The boss, however, was whipping the floor at the party. We were almost at the point of having a TPK, and then out of nowhere, Ryuto appeared standing in front of the boss with a brand new ability. Insert epic anime music, but it's like a DMPC and it's not actually you, the players. That sucks. At this point, the DM was playing alone. The players were watching a neat actual play. I was also thinking that it was a little lame that once again it would be the DMPC who landed the final strike, but at least it would be a neat ending for the character arc of an NPC. But then with one hit, Ryuto almost died. But then a Deus Ex Machina came to Deus Ex Machina at the DMPC. Another DMPC. A guy that was vaguely set up in lore dump visions who one-shot the boss and TP'd our heroes to the dorms, where they met 3 more DMPCs. That promised that they would stick around, and then the session ended. The DM asked if we liked the campaign, and one of the players said something like, "I don't know what to tell you, DM. We did nothing. We were just watching." Bro, this is literally an XP to level 3 skip.
That just means the world to me, guys. Thanks. My favorite part was that I accomplished nothing the whole game.
Then the DM said, "Well, it was the plan since the beginning. You saw name of Deus Ex Machina DMPC in the visions. Now you will discover new things with these new NPCs." And then he left the call. Every one of the players just stayed there in shock. In that after-session call, I learned this type of stuff had always been a problem with DM. Constantly, his friend would call out his DMPC syndrome, and he promised to change, and apparently never did. The other player did say they would talk to him, but I never knew if they did or not. Finally, here was something that really hurt me. DM promised that in between arcs, there would be 4-session-long interludes for each character. The interlude that would come after the first arc was Mai's. After 2 weeks of silence, aside from some memes, I asked if there was going to be a session the next day. DM said they were going on hiatus while he prepared the interlude for Mai. It has been 6 months since that message, and there has been no other communication from him on this part. So, I have to say that even though I had a really bad time at this table, this campaign did give me my favorite PC to PC interaction I've ever had. If this ends up in the video, I'll be checking the comments if you want to hear a wholesome story, like this one. Well, I guess you have a quest to go on. Get in the comments. But in any case, I think that having important central NPCs can work in an adventure. Having an NPC like Princess Zelda that the quest revolves around is okay, or even good. If the players bond with that NPC, it can really, really work. But 1, they have to bond with the NPC, and 2, they can't be the main character. In The Legend of Zelda, Princess Zelda does have agency in that story, but the main character is Link. The person doing the world saving is Link, not Zelda. In a similar fashion, it needs to be the player characters doing the saving, not the NPC, never the NPC. Even in combat, I have players control my NPCs, so even there, they still feel like they have agency in that situation. How to make powerful NPCs work is a sort of complex issue, but it comes down to agency. The agency should always be in the player's hands. And this DM did not know about that principle, I guess. I've been in the Shadow Dark group for about 4 to 6 months now. For some context, it's very loose on the rules and has a lot of character death due to an intentionally unfair and cruel world. The idea is losing is fun, and dying is actually the main way to make the party stronger, which is reinforced by house rules we had. A few weeks ago, we had a new person join, let's call him X. When he was asked to make a character and share the JSON file to import into the VTT, he gave a rogue character which has no negative modifiers and also max gold. One of us sarcastically pointed out how amazing the rolls were, but the DM didn't actually say anything. While that might not be proof enough of cheating, he did try to roll outside the chat box, which wouldn't share the roll with us, and tried to convince us that he rolled a nat 20. Quite suspicious. All these good rolls. The next week, when X didn't join, he wasn't in the call. The DM said his rationale for being okay with this is that he didn't care if the way X enjoys TTRPGs is by making the perfect character. He's still squishy and can't cheat in-game, which, I mean, I kinda get. Third week, he went on a tangent about wanting to kill all the goblins, and when we came upon a few sheep, he decided to kill them all too. What the hell did the sheep do to you, man? What the? We decided just to leave him and head to the dungeon. He got ambushed, and none of the other 3 of us helped him. He almost died and got all his coins stolen. So that's a bit of karma, at least. Later in the dungeon, he would just explore rooms on his own and not stay with the group. But he still wanted the loot that we would find to be distributed to him. It's week 4 now, and surprisingly, he hasn't done anything bad, although he did keep attacking undead with non-magical weapons, which they are completely immune to, when literally anything else creative would have helped. But I'm glad that's the worst thing he did. He did one thing that gave me hope. He was asked if he wanted to retcon something he did earlier in the game. Where most people would take the help, he decided he would let the dice decide. Strange change in behavior, but honestly, I'm not complaining. On week 5, he did nothing wrong. I mean, he is still the same character. He starts avoidable fights and died fighting a wraith when the rest of us were escaping the dungeon after finishing the quest. He would also disagree with the DM, saying, nah, I'll just do that anyway, when the DM said he couldn't do a thing. But things aren't uncomfortable anymore, and I do appreciate that. I think that maybe he saw that the others didn't like what he was doing and toned it down and stopped trying to cheat because he's having fun without all the cheating. Hey, problem players can actually improve. It is possible, but I do think even if a player does improve on their own, it's still worth it to talk about the behavior. It looks like it's toned down, but it's still present. Behavior can get better, behavior can get worse, and while you feel better about this player, there's no telling how other people feel. As I've said before, if you don't talk about problems, your perception of them becomes inflated in your head. This doesn't apply to everyone, but it does apply to some people. So even if the problem is becoming less of an issue at the table, some people might still be holding a grudge, and that means that it could explode later on down the line. This doesn't need to be a confrontation or an argument, but just talking to the guy about this behavior can be a real big help in preventing anything bad from happening to your table in the future. I've known for ages that the story is a tabletop role-playing game horror story, so none of those, I don't know if this counts disclaimers here, but your video about Adam Cobill reminded me of it. This happened back in 2021, right after I moved across the country. We were playing Dungeons & Dragons with myself, my queer platonic partner, the Dungeon Master, and the Dungeon Master's best friend, aka their biggest enabler. About a year before this, the friend group my partner and the Dungeon Master had met in had largely imploded thanks to manipulation on all sides, though we were unaware of the DM's problems until after all this. We had played one campaign, a short, sweet campaign to introduce me to Dungeons & Dragons before getting into a meatier game, though the DM had decided to completely trash the interconnected angsty backstory between me and my partner and replace it with a big undo button. We didn't use maps, only theater of the mind, which I massively struggled with as a person with aphantasia? Well, there's not a pronunciation guide on this page. We only ever played over Discord with video on the whole time. This is important for later. Unsurprisingly, we didn't have any tools in place because the DM said we were such close friends and already know everyone's triggers. I had started out playing a changeling, but wasn't connected with that character, so on the 3rd or 4th session I changed characters. I drew up a backstory for a noble drow wizard who had an older brother, then a year after went missing, and suddenly everyone was treating my character like an only child, with only himself and his brother's betrothed being aware of his disappearance at all. I left that gap for my DM to play in, figuring maybe there would be a false hydra, why would you want that, or mind flayers, or any number of possibilities for them to mess with. The DM had requested names of people we would get catharsis from winning against in-game, in contests as baddies to kill, arrest, etc. And I provided the name of like a former childhood friend who had been my safe person to turn to and had essayed me when we were teenagers. When it finally came time to go to my player character's hometown to figure out what was happening with that year gap, my DM decided to make it mind flayers that were there. As someone who loved delving into more classic D&D monsters, I was excited to see how this would unfold. And then the same session we arrived and discovered the mind flayers, the DM dropped that my character's uncle had actually been molesting him right up until he left for adventure. They described a couple of the moments my character remembered, and for the first time in my life, I started to have like an honest-to-God trauma-triggered panic attack. At that point, it really started to blur for me, but I remember my partner massively stepping in and trying to stop the DM from continuing this ridiculousness, and the DM's friend egging them on a little bit. I genuinely tried to pull through and just talk about it later, but I end up slamming my laptop shut and barely managing to call my dog into my room and help ground me before a full-on shouldering, barely breathing, dry heaving panic attack set in. The DM constantly sent BS gaslighting apologies with such hits as "not remembering" when I told them about my own essay multiple times, as if it's a rare thing and not an uncomfortably common occurrence despite me saying I needed space. I never read any of their apologies until 2 years later, but my partner had already scheduled flights to visit me, and they read through them and summarized for me. And their summaries were honestly giving the DM too much credit. They also told me that it was obvious I wasn't okay from the look on my face and the sound of my voice, even to them, a direct quote, as they massively struggled to interpret cues from someone, even someone as close as I am. It took me a while to feel safe enough to be a player again, but I realized that the hours of live plays I'd watched, I already had a pretty good handle on D&D as a system, and just tried running Dungeons & Dragons myself. I genuinely thought, can't get worse than that. And while looking for DM advice, discovered the existence of not only lines and veils, but safety cards and simple lists of general no-go topics. Almost 5 years later, with 3 homebrew campaigns and a heavily modified Cursed Strahd campaign, all started out of spite for that one person. My platonic partner plays in a bunch of them, and I've started to DM for a lot of other people, and I've been running as a player in one of my friend's Eberron campaigns for 3 years now, and truly loving the game. I decided to make a single TikTok about it to a popular sound, mostly for my friends. I had the DM blocked for ages, and they removed their bestie from my followers. But I got a message from them on Discord saying I had no right to post about it. The TikTok, a caption on screen just reading, "me DMing my first game using safety tools and constant check-ins," while lip-syncing, "hey, isn't this easy?" I then made more because a year and a half later, they still had their enablers stalking my account, or stalking it themselves from a dummy account, to see if I was talking about this. Some people just shouldn't have positions of even limited authority. Thanks for reading and for being background audio while I hand-sew some cosplays for hours on end. I think the DM just thought, because this person gave the name of the perpetrator as like someone they want to kill in the game, the DM believed, oh, well, I can just put the whole incident in the game. And bro, like, that's not how it works. I think that maybe there could have been more clear communication issues, but frankly, if you can't reason through the idea of, hey, maybe a surprise assault scene might be taken badly by a victim, I don't know what to tell you. I don't think you're smart enough to DM in general, bro. The problem player and the DM in question still following this person and stalking their account, yeah, that does make sense. My own problem player still follows my account to this day, and I still see them on my Instagram stories, so yeah, you know, what can you do? I don't block them just because I think it's funny. But yeah, in general, this is very reminiscent of that Kobo story. And that guy, even though he had a lot of followers, lost everything for a good reason. This crap's just cringe. And creepy. Hey, that's a wrap. Sorry, it's been a while since the last episode. I'm still kind of evaluating what to do with the series. Let me know what you think of this new visual format, though. I'm trying to experiment a little. But in any case, if you guys enjoyed this episode so much you watched it all the way to the end, then please do leave the comment block a lead to let me know you are loyal to the tavern and made it all the way to the end of the video. If you want to see more of our content, then check out the 10th Tomb, our actual play D&D podcast. We referenced it in this episode. It's linked up in the cards. But before you go, please do leave a like on this one and subscribe to Crispy's Tavern so you don't miss any of our content that comes out. And finally, if you want to support us directly and help make these videos possible, then you can sub to our Patreon and get access to tons of exclusive content. In essence, like, comment, subscribe, support. We will see you all next time. Farewell.
Are you in love?